The iron-banded door slammed shut behind you before your eyes adjusted to the guttering torchlight, and that was when you realized the corridor smelled not of incense or polish, but of sour milk and old blood. Somewhere beyond the stone archway a baby was crying, its wail thin, rasping, already tired, as though the child had learned on its first breath that hope was best abandoned early. You tightened your muffler against the January chill of 1666 Madrid, but the cold still gnawed under your fingernails like hungry mice. You were court physician to half of Europe's crowned heads, yet tonight you felt smaller than the flame lapping at the torch. One wrong diagnosis, and the scaffold waited. They had summoned you with a single unsealed note. Come to El Escorial at once. Tell no one. No wax, no mark of the royal seal, only a minuscule blot where the ink trembled, written, you suspected, by a trembling hand. The messenger wouldn't meet your gaze, as though your face might remember his Inquisition later. The coach ride north rattled every joint in your body, but it rattled something deeper. A question beating against bone. Why was the birth of an infanta being handled like a prison execution? Through the next door, scarlet tapestries hung limp in the frozen air. Their woven battles, knights impaling Moorish foes, looked more like autopsies than victories under this pallid torch glow. A tiny page in blue velvet appeared, his lips split by the wind. He bowed, then spoke so softly you leaned forward to catch it. Her High Majesty awaits, Senor Doctor. Speak only when asked. His voice cracked on the last word. You couldn't decide whether it was fear or puberty that strangled him. He led you into a vaulted chamber that once housed the bones of saints. Now it housed something holier, or more cursed, depending on whom you believed. A thick velvet screen partitioned the room. As the page slipped behind it, the crying sharpened, rose, then cut off as suddenly as a thread snapped by shears. Silence pooled, and in that silence the entire palace seemed to hold its breath. You stepped around the screen, and nearly staggered. The Queen, Mariana of Austria, sat propped in a silver birthing chair, her face a parchment of exhaustion and triumph. Night-black hair clung to her temples, blood spattered her ivory chemise like crushed roses. Beside her, on a silk pillow, lay the infant everyone would call Dona Clara if she lived long enough to receive a name in Massachusetts. Clara's skin was the color of candle wax. Her eyelids fluttered like moth wings. But it was her jawline that stopped your breath, a grotesque jut, tongue protruding, the classic Habsburg prognathism, only worse than any you had ever seen. A single glance told you what must never be said aloud. This deformity did not come from the usual tangle of Habsburg blood. It came from something tighter, more forbidden. Your mind raced through the family tree, branches bent back upon themselves like a knotted crown of thorns. The Queen's mother and father were uncle and niece. But rumors, whispered in Vienna taverns, hissed in Seville confessionals, hinted at darker unions, cousins claimed as half-siblings to quiet the clergy. Courtiers spoke of la pureza de la sangre with pride, yet every generation carried more ghosts than heirs. The Queen noticed your hesitation. "Dr. Morales," she breathed, "is my daughter strong?" Behind her words you heard the real plea. "Tell me she will live. Tell me God hasn't punished my house for the sins we keep repeating." Her eyes glimmered, not with royal authority, but with the raw terror of a woman who has gambled everything, even her child, for the sake of a crown. You swallowed. Her pulses. You touched the tiny wrist. It beat like a bird trapped under ice. Delicate majesty, but present. You dared not look at the king. Charles II stood in the corner, hair powdered, eyes bloodshot, gnawing the inside of his cheek. Spain called him El Hechizado, the bewitched, because his limp, his epilepsy, his infertility all felt like sorcery. Yet even he, warped product of endless consanguinity, stared at this newborn with something approaching pity. A door creaked. The Grand Inquisitor glided in, smelling of frankincense and menace. He surveyed the room with a predator's detachment, then fixed on you. "The child will be baptized privately," he announced, and examined for signs of the devil's handiwork. His gaze lingered on Clara's jaw. You knew what the Inquisition did to infants deemed monstrous births. Salt on the tongue, then earth sooner than air. The Queen flinched. "You will do no such thing," she snapped, steel in her voice. "My daughter bears the mark of royal lineage, nothing more." Words brave enough to cost a peasant her life, yet royalty could wrap defiance in piety and call it divine right. You forced yourself to breathe evenly. The stakes sharpened. If you declared Clara healthy, you risked the fury of God and anatomy. If you declared her doomed, you signed the death warrant of a baby, and perhaps yourself. The palace rumor mill would grind your name to powder. Courtiers would ask why Clara's jaw mirrored, not merely the Habsburg jut, but a distortion seen nowhere else except in legends of cursed twins. Twins. The word flashed like lightning. What if the whispers were true? That behind these gilded doors, siblings had bedded siblings to keep foreign blood from ruining Spain's purity? Such a secret, if ever shouted in the plazas of Castile, could topple the throne faster than any French cannon. "Doctor," the queen pressed, voice trembling. You felt every gaze hooking into your flesh. The king's hollow hope, the inquisitor's icy calculation, the palace midwife's exhausted dread. You bent over the pillow. Clara opened her eyes, startling amber, like sunlight hitting diluted wine. Her gaze found yours with uncanny focus, as though she already knew words and waited to judge yours. You touched the fontanelle. The skull bones were soft but fused unevenly, ridges shifting under your fingertips like tectonic plates. You checked her breathing, wet, labored, yet determined. At last you straightened, spine cracking. Majesty, the infanta is fragile but viable. She needs warmth, goat's milk mixed with ground almonds, and prayers. Prayers, Spain's universal prescription, equal parts medicine and diplomacy. The queen exhaled a sob of relief. Yet across the room the inquisitor merely raised an eyebrow, filing your statement for future cross-examination. The page hurried forward with a silver basin. You washed, watching crimson swirl down the drain hole like secrets spiraling into oblivion. As you dried your hands, a soft clink echoed. The king's signet ring struck the hilt of his sword. Not a threat, only a nervous tick, but it reminded everyone of the steel behind silk. He cleared his throat. "Dr. Morales, you will remain at court until further notice." Spoken gently, but the order chained you more tightly than any prison. Outside, bells tolled matins though dawn was hours away. Another wail erupted, this time from the queen herself. Her shoulders shook. For a moment the monarchy looked like any mother terrified for her child. You stepped back, suddenly intruding on a family tragedy too colossal for one lifetime to bear. Yet through the blare of bells and sobs, one fact hammered your mind. If Clara lived, Spain would crown a princess whose blood carried a taboo tangled darker than any tapestry. And you alone had seen enough to unravel it. The inquisitor escorted you toward the door. A cold draft sliced through the room, and every torch guttered simultaneously, as if the palace itself shuddered at the secret now pulsing in its veins. What you discovered next could either save the empire, or damn it forever. Moonlight slithered across the cloister floor like a blade, silver and cold, as the inquisitor guided you toward a guest cell lined with tapestries depicting the martyrdom of St. Lawrence, skin sizzling on an iron grate. The hallway reeked of lie, as if someone had scoured the very stones to scrub away treasonous whispers. When the bolt thunked home behind you, you discovered they'd left nothing but a cot, a jug of water, and a single quill with no ink. A silent reminder, your words, your verdict, already belonged to them. You lay awake, counting heartbeats against the ringing silence. Somewhere beyond the courtyard a wolf howled, or maybe it was only a servant coughing in the stable shadows. Either way the sound raised gooseflesh along your arms. You tried to pray, but the name that surfaced wasn't Christ or the Virgin, it was Clara. You pictured her jaw, that impossible jet of bone like a prophecy carved in flesh. How many generations of royal sin did it take to etch such a mark? Just before dawn a key grated. Father Villalobos, royal confessor, slipped inside. His cassock smelled of stale myrrh and sleeplessness. He produced a scrap of vellum smeared with rust-brown spots. You hoped it was iron gall ink, not dried blood. "A genealogy chart," he whispered, thrusting it into your hands. "Hide it well. You did not receive this from me." The parchment mapped marriages like a spider web drawn by a madman. Uncle to niece, cousin to cousin, looping back until first names repeated like echoes. And there, sprawled in shaky Latin, was the confirmation that chilled your marrow. Philip IV plus Maria Anna, his sister's daughter. Issue, Charles II, Joanna, Ferdinand. Patricia, Mariana, Clara, branches sprouting from a knot of incest so tight the tree could no longer breathe. Villalobos's eyes glittered in the half-light. If the people discover this, they'll turn on the crown. But if Rome discovers you knew and stayed silent, they'll turn on you. He pressed 2 fingers to the parchment. The queen trusts you. I prefer living physicians to dead martyrs. Before you could reply, he slipped away, leaving incense and dread in his wake. At sunrise, a liveried guard escorted you through frost-rimmed gardens toward the royal nursery. Each footstep crunched like bones under snow. Finches flitted overhead, tiny splashes of color against an iron sky. The palace fountain was sheathed in ice, water frozen mid-arc, as though time itself hesitated. Inside the nursery the hearth roared, filling the air with the scent of pine resin and scorched milk. Wet nurses hummed lullabies while rocking wicker cradles. Yet every face stiffened when you entered, as if your very presence could summon plague. Clara lay swaddled in crimson velvet, an odd choice for an infant, but the color disguised any blood she might cough up. You leaned close. Her breath came in uneven puffs. A thin film of sweat glazed her forehead despite the chill. "Easy, Pequeña," you murmured. Her tiny fingers clutched the edge of your sleeve with surprising strength. That grip, was it defiance or desperation? A nurse curtsied. "She refuses the goat's milk, senor. Chokes on it." The woman's eyes darted toward a corner where a black-robed figure lurked. The Inquisitor again, his silhouette devouring candle glow. You lifted the feeding horn. The liquid inside smelled faintly sour. Your mind raced. If she starved, you'd be blamed. If you force-fed and she aspirated, you'd be cursed. You asked for boiled water and honey, improvising a syrup thin enough to drip past her malformed jaw. As you guided the horn to her lips, Clara fixed you with that amber gaze. A mirror, you thought, of every Habsburg ancestor watching their gamble play out in miniature. She swallowed. Once. Twice. The room exhaled. But a nurse gasped. Clara's cheeks blushed deep violet, and a strangled squeak escaped her throat. You tipped her forward, tapping her back. A curdled blob of milk and mucus splattered onto your boot. Relief flooded. She breathed again, but weaker. Behind you, the Inquisitor's voice slithered. "If the child cannot thrive, perhaps it is God's will." You rounded on him. Or perhaps it is man's arrogance. You snapped before you could stop yourself. A dangerous spark lit his eyes, but you held his stare. The nurses froze, hands fluttering like caged birds. A heavy silence stretched, then a bell tolled tierce, and the Inquisitor glided away without another word. Yet you felt his gaze linger, invisible claws raking your back. Later, in the apothecary wing, you ground almonds and fennel seeds, searching for a draught gentle enough for an infant yet strong enough to stave off infection. The mortar echoed like distant drums. Outside the window courtiers gathered in cloaks trimmed with fox and sable, gossip rising in cloudy puffs. You caught snippets. Another monstrosity. French ambassador arriving, silver shipments stalled. Every rumor a tinder spark near the throne's dry timber. A sudden knock. The page, lips still chapped, eyes wide. "The king requests you, doctor." Urgently. Moments later you stood in Charles II's private chapel. Stained glass saints bled jewel tones across the marble, casting the king in shifting rubies and sapphires. He knelt before the altar, shoulders trembling. When he rose, you saw tears glistening in the creases beside his nose. "Does my daughter live?" he asked, voice hoarse. "For now," you answered carefully. "But she needs wet nurses with particular training. Her palate may never close." The king's gaze dropped to a golden reliquary shaped like a heart. "My father's ghost haunts these halls, doctor. He whispers that Spain is dying because our blood is rotting." He looked up, desperation raw. "Tell me, is Clara cursed?" Sweat prickled your scalp. To say yes would condemn the infant. To say no might condemn a nation to further madness. You chose a razor-thin line. Majesty, curses dwell in secrecy. Air and light can banish many ills. A public christening, magnificent, joyous, could rally faith in her. He blinked. Hope flickered, then flared. "Yes, a procession on Candlemas. Let the people see an infanta touched by God's grace." He seized your elbows. "Prepare her. I'll arrange everything." As you left, your stomach nodded. A public unveiling could save Clara, or expose the grotesque truth in full sunlight. Either outcome would ignite the powder keg beneath Spain's throne. That evening you returned to your cell, to find the genealogy chart gone. In its place lay a single white carnation and a note. "We all bleed the same." No signature. You scanned the corridor, empty. Your pulse thundered. Someone knew you possessed the secret, and wanted you reminded of your own vulnerability. Sleep proved impossible. You paced until the moon dipped, rehearsing contingencies, herbal remedies, distraction tactics, escape routes through the kitchens. Each time you pictured Clara's tiny jaw, an absurd tenderness pierced your ribs. You had delivered hundreds of infants. None had ever frightened you like this one. Perhaps because none had ever needed you so completely to survive the sins she never chose. Just before dawn, distant shouts shattered the hush. Boots thundered across flagstones. You cracked your door, saw torches bobbing like fireflies, guards rushing toward the royal wing. A nurse streaked past, face ashen. The infant, she's vanished. Vanished. One word, infinite calamities. Kidnapped? Smothered? Hidden by allies or enemies. You sprinted after the panic, heart hammering. Outside the nursery, the queen's scream ripped through the corridor, raw and primal. Inside, the cradle lay overturned, velvet blankets trampled. A window hung ajar, winter wind lashing the drapes. Snowflakes whirled in, tiny indifferent stars. On the floor, a drop of fresh blood glimmered like a crimson jewel. Somewhere within the labyrinthine palace, a newborn carrying Spain's darkest secret was either dying or already dead. Booted feet pounded the corridors, the clamor ricocheting off stone like musket fire. You plunged into the melee, heart drumming so hard it blurred your vision. Somewhere a courtier sobbed. Infanticide, God preserve us. Smoky torchlight danced over desperate faces, each one a canvas of fear and accusation. A gust of icy wind knifed through your doublet. It smelled of pine sap and something coppery. Blood? Seal every gate, the captain of the guard bellowed. Halberds slammed together, a metallic thunderclap that made the chandelier tremble overhead. You shouldered past a knot of servants toward the nursery window. Frost feathered the lattice. Outside, the garden sprawled like a black sea under starlight. No fresh prints, no broken shrubbery. Whoever took Clara moved like vapor. A fist clamped your arm. Father Villalobos, cheeks ghost white. They'll blame you, he hissed. The Inquisitor is already sharpening questions. His breath stank of ashes and mint. You swallowed bile. Where's the queen? In her oratory, half delirious. They gave her laudanum. His gaze flicked to the window. Find the child before dawn or Spain will burn. A shrill trumpet blast sliced the air, signal to bar the city gates. 1,000 lanterns would soon sweep the alleys of Madrid. Yet instinct screamed the danger lurked much closer. You sprinted to the apothecary wing, cloak streaming. Beneath the stink of camphor and bile you caught a trace of something new. Lavender oil, faint but distinct. Only one person you knew drenched herself in that scent, the French ambassadress, Madame de Rochefort, whose honeyed words dripped with Bourbon ambition. Could she covet a bargaining chip as tiny as an infant? Footsteps. You ducked behind a curtain of drying herbs. 2 figures whispered past, the ambassadress's lady-in-waiting and the page in blue velvet. His hands shook as he passed a bundle swaddled in crimson, Clara's blanket. You bit down on an oath. The page, you remembered the split lips, the cracked voice. Had he been a spy all along? They turned down a servant's stairwell. You shadowed them, boots landing cat-soft on stone slick with rush-like grease. In the lantern glow the bundle shifted, emitting a thin, exhausted whimper. Relief surged, she was alive. The stair spat you into an undercroft lined with wine barrels. Candle flames guttered in the draft, popping like gunshots. The lady-in-waiting shoved open a concealed postern that led to the old Roman aqueduct tunnels, escape arteries predating the palace. Clever. Even the king's locksmiths had forgotten these passages. As she stooped, the page's nerve shattered. "Milady, I can't." "Quiet, fool," she snapped, lavender scent flaring as she twisted a vial under his nose. "Chloroform? No, simply hartshorn to keep him conscious. Spain belongs to those who dare, not those who pray. Hand me the babe." You stepped from shadow. "Touch that child and France declares war on her own soul." She whirled, skirts whipping dust. Moonlight through the postern limned her face, beauty carved in ice. "Dr. Morales," she purred, "the very witness I needed. Tell Madrid you saw the Infanta perish. Spain will weep, France will comfort. Everyone wins, except your conscience, perhaps." Behind you, iron rasped, another conspirator blocking the stair. A trap. Your pulse kicked like a spooked horse. Clara whimpered again. Even that feeble cry felt like a sword in your hand. You raised empty palms. "Let me examine her. If she dies en route, your king gains nothing." A pause, calculating. Then she extended the bundle. The moment Clara settled in your arms, heat blossomed in your chest. Her eyes fluttered open, molten amber fringed with tears. "See," you whispered. Still breathing. You rocked her gently, letting her warmth seep through velvet and fear. Madame de Rochefort stepped closer, dagger glinting. "Now hand her back." No, the word escaped before thought. Every corridor of your life narrowed to this chamber and this heartbeat. "Kill me, and the tunnels will drown in scandal. Spare me, and I may grant you a miracle." Her brow arched. "Miracle?" You drew a shaky breath. "I can certify the child unfit to rule, insanity born of unnatural blood. Spain would be forced to seek a foreign heir. Perhaps a Bourbon prince?" You hated yourself, but bargaining bought seconds. She considered, dagger lowering a fraction. Write the affidavit. Tonight. I need ink. A cracked laugh. You physicians, always a condition. She motioned to the page to fetch supplies from a barrel-top desk. Your mind raced. Ink could buy more than seconds, it could buy escape. As the boy uncorked a bottle, you caught his gaze. In those frightened eyes lay a plea you hadn't noticed. He was no spy, just a pawn drowning in terror. You spoke softly. Ink fresh? Show me. He brought the vial. You uncapped it, sniffed gall ink. Beside it, a candle stub guttered. You dipped the quill, then flick, sent a comet of ink into the lady's eyes. She shrieked, blade clattering. Run, you roared at the page, thrusting Clara into his arms. He bolted. You seized the candle, hurled it onto a barrel's leaking bunghole. Brandy splashed, flames mushroomed. A boom of igniting fumes hurled Madame backward. Heat lashed your face, barrels exploded like thunder. You dived through the postern, rolling onto frost-hardened earth. Behind, fire roared up the stairwell, devouring the tunnel's oxygen and the plot with it. You staggered after the page, smoke scoring your lungs. He hugged Clara tight as you guided him along a moonlit colonnade toward the royal chapel. Bells were already ringing, alarms or angelus, you couldn't tell. At the chapel door you met Father Villalobos clutching a monstrance like a shield. His eyes widened at the soot, the infant. Madre de Dios. Sanctuary, you rasped. Lock us in. He barred the door as guards thundered past, chasing phantom enemies. In the candle-bright nave Clara finally quieted, cheeks pink from heat and fear. A tremor shook your hands, shock setting in. Villalobos touched the child's misshapen jaw, sorrow flooding his gaze. Will she survive this night? She must, you said, though your own knees buckled. Because if she doesn't, Spain's crown will fall into hands far crueler than nature. He stared, weighing faith against politics. At last he whispered, then we protect her with truth. You unrolled a fresh parchment from the lectern, psalm text on one side, blank on the other. In midnight ink you began drafting the document that could either purify a dynasty or drown it in fire. The full genealogy, the confession of incest, the prescription for a new council of regency chosen by the Cortes. Not by blood but by merit. Radical, perhaps suicidal, but light, as you'd told the king, banishes many ills. Quill scratching, heart racing, you posed the question that would decide every fate in the chapel. Could a kingdom built on secrets survive their unveiling? Outside, the palace bells tolled again, this time a slower, deeper peal. Was it the alarm finally silenced, or the knell of an old order dying? You signed the last line, blood-red wax pooling beside the seal. Footsteps thundered toward the chapel doors. The chapel doors shuddered beneath mailed fists, iron on oak, a thunder that rattled stained-glass saints in their leaden prisons. Candle flames guttered, shadows jittered like souls trying to flee their flesh. Father Villalobos pressed the monstrance to his chest, knuckles whitening around the gilded sunburst. You tucked the parchment into the folds of your coat, feeling its brittle weight like a loaded pistol. A voice on the other side, slick as eel fat. Open, in the name of his Catholic Majesty. The Grand Inquisitor. Who else could lace an order with both velvet and venom? You laid Clara in the page's trembling arms, then strode to the portal. Her Majesty's physician is within, you called, forcing calm. The child has been recovered alive. A hush, then bolts clanged back. The doors yawned, revealing a corridor stabbed with torchlight. The Inquisitor emerged, robes flowing, his eyes twin shards of obsidian. Behind him, musketeers leveled arquebus, as though an infant might charge. He surveyed the scene, soot-smeared doctor, smoke-reeking page, whimpering newborn. His nostrils flared at the scent of charred brandy still clinging to you. Explain this heresy, he hissed, before I scour it with flame. Your voice rang louder than you felt. French agents stole the Infanta. I risked my life to retrieve her. Question me later. First save your future queen. Future? The word coiled like a snake on his tongue. He turned to Villalobos. Father, you will testify to the purity of this child's blood. Villalobos swallowed. God judges souls, not pedigrees. The Inquisitor's lip curled. A theologian's dodge. Very well, trial by ordeal. At dawn we submit the babe to the water test. Your stomach iced. They meant to dunk Clara in a font, if she floated, which? If she sank and drowned, innocent but dead. Centuries-old superstition masquerading as justice. No, you said, stepping forward. The queen herself ordered me to guard her daughter's life. Defy me, and you defy Mariana. A dangerous glimmer lit his eyes. Then let the queen speak. They marched the lot of you through hushed cloisters where every echo felt like an omen. In the royal oratory, Queen Mariana knelt before a smoking brazier, laudanum haze veiling her gaze. When she looked up and saw the child safe, her cry fused relief and agony. She gathered Clara against her breast, heedless of the malformed jaw. The Inquisitor bowed only enough to mock respect. Majesty, grave doubts cloud the Infanta's legitimacy. For Spain's sake, we must test. Mariana surged to her feet, hair unbound, eyes blazing like oil lamps. Touch her, and Castile will rise against you. I have lost 3 children to coffins this year. I will not surrender my last. An uneasy ripple among the guards, loyalty pulling against fear. You caught the captain's eye, saw hesitation. Momentum hung in a knife-edge breath. You produced the parchment. Majesty, I have drawn the royal lineage. Every knot, every sin. Gasps rustled. You met her gaze. Hide it, and rumor becomes legend. Publish it, and Spain may bleed, yes, but heal. She took the document with trembling hands, scanned the web of incestuous unions. Tears slipped free. What would you have me do? Denounce my own parents? Confess, Villalobos urged softly. Turn the poison into medicine. The Inquisitor lunged, snatching for the scroll. Mariana stepped back, firelight catching the gold of her wedding ring. Father Diego, she said, voice low as thunder, forget not who crowns bishops in this realm. He froze, power recognized power. But hatred flickered like a wick behind his eyes. You sensed he would not yield, he would merely bide. By mid-morning, news of the kidnapping and rescue raced through El Escorial faster than plague. Courtiers assembled in the Hall of Mirrors, gossip crackling. Outside, peasants pressed at the palace gates, craning for a glimpse of the fragile miracle who had survived fire and treason overnight. Against all prudence, Mariana ordered a balcony appearance, to answer rumor with living proof. You objected, Villalobos seconded, yet she stood firm. If light heals, she said, then let there be sunlight. So, at noon, trumpets blared. The queen stepped onto the marble balustrade, infant cradled high. Winter sun flared off royal brocade, haloing mother and child. A collective gasp rippled across the courtyard, part wonder, part horror, as Clara's jutting jaw caught full daylight. Mariana's voice rang. Behold Infanta Clara, by God's grace delivered from the flames. Some cheered. Others crossed themselves in dread. Then, silence fractured. A woman's scream. La Hechicera, the witch. Someone hurled a rotten pomegranate. It burst scarlet against the parapet, splattering queenly skirts. Guards drew swords, shields locked, but the whisper spread through the crowd like wildfire. Cursed blood, devil child, war omen. From the corner of your eye you saw the Inquisitor watching, hands tucked in sleeves, lips curved in a predator's smile. The spectacle played into his creed. Fear breeds obedience. You edged closer to Mariana. Majesty inside now. She nodded, face gray. Yet as she turned, Clara's body jerked. A wet rattle escaped her throat. You took her, hot as fever, eyelids fluttering. Pneumonia? Smoke inhalation? Her fragile lungs were losing the duel. You dashed to the infirmary, shouting for hot stones, mustard poultices, a draught of horehound and honey. Nurses scrambled. Villalobos prayed. Outside, the mob roared and pelted shutters with stones. El Escorial had become a besieged heart, its every beat contested. Hours bled into dusk. You cupped Clara's tiny chest, timing each gasp fainter slower. At Vesper's first bell she ceased breathing altogether. You rubbed her sternum, breathed into that twisted mouth. Nothing. Silence yawned, cavernous. Mariana collapsed, keening. Villalobos wept openly. The page slid to the floor, clutching a splintered crucifix. Behind you, soft steps, then the Inquisitor's whisper. God is judged. He reached for the parchment still clutched in Mariana's fist. Your hand shot out, gripping his wrist. Fire flashed in his eyes. Rebellion, he breathed. You'll burn for this. But even as he spoke, heavy boots thundered down the corridor, soldiers bearing the lion banner of Aragon, summoned by the Cortez faction who had read your scroll. The captain saluted the queen. Your Majesty, the courtesanos stand ready to swear fealty, on one condition, governance by regency, no more consanguineous unions. Mariana's eyes, red-rimmed, hollowed, lifted from her daughter's still face. Somewhere inside that grief, iron sparked. She rose, shoulders squaring. Summon the Cortez. Tomorrow we write new law in Clara's name. The Inquisitor hissed like water on coals, but blades circled him. His era of terror was bleeding out with the twilight. Yet in your arms lay the price, 7 pounds of silence, cooling fast. You brushed a thumb over Clara's closed lids. "Little one," you whispered, "your life was brief as candle wax, but bright enough to scorch a kingdom awake." Outside, snow began to fall, soft, relentless, muffling the cries of both jubilation and mourning. Night swallowed the palace, leaving only the hush of flakes and the echo of a heartbeat that had already stopped. Bells tolled low across the frozen cloisters, their bronze throats hoarse from overuse these last 2 years of royal funerals. By torch flicker you guided the tiny casket toward the pantheon of kings, each footstep echoing like a gavel upon Spain's sentence. The pine box felt absurdly light, 7 pounds of flesh, 1,000 tons of consequence. Resinous smoke stung your eyes. You told yourself it was smoke and not grief. Inside the black marble vault, monarchs slept in gilded sarcophagi stacked like chess pieces awaiting the next move. Steam curled from breathing mouths, 40 mourners, yet the chamber seemed colder for their gathered heat. Queen Mariana knelt alone at the foot of the altar, veil soaked where tears had frozen to lace. When Father Villalobos intoned the final absolution, she pressed her lips to Clara's coffin with a gentleness that cracked the room's brittle composure. Even the stone angels appeared to look away. But the hush shattered as a herald burst in, tabard smeared with street mud. "Riots at the Puerta del Sol," he cried. Inquisition partisans clash with Cortes guards. They chant blood untainted or no blood at all. His voice quavered on the last syllable, a boy reporting apocalypse. Mariana rose, spine rigid. "Dr. Morales with me." No title for the Inquisitor, who stood manacled between 2 halberdiers. He sneered, irons clinking like snake scales. The Queen's eyes never left his. "Escort Father Diego to the east turret. If a single riot spark reaches this palace, throw him from the parapet." The guards dragged him away, his laughter bouncing off marble like loose coins. Snow fell thicker as you crossed the courtyard, flurries swirling in torch eddies. The air bristled with shouts, steel on steel, wood on flesh. Near the gate you glimpsed a pyre of confiscated books, pages curling into orange tongues. The mob wanted monsters. If none arrived, they would write new ones in smoke. Inside the Salon de los Espejos, the provisional Cortes awaited, a mosaic of nobles, bishops, and low-born magistrates whose velvet sleeves could not hide ink-stained fingers. They turned as Mariana entered, silence rippling under frescoed ceilings. She raised the genealogy scroll high, its wax seal cracked but legible. "This parchment," she said, voice steady, "exposes centuries of sin, my sin, yet it shall be the cornerstone of Spain's rebirth. Henceforth no marriage closer than the 4th degree shall claim the throne. Let merit temper blood." Murmurs, shock, relief, outrage, then applause, thin at first, swelling like an organ chord. Somewhere in the back a canon of Toledo crossed himself, muttering, "May God stomach novelty." You caught Villalobos's eye. He nodded, though exhaustion lined every wrinkle. Reform had leapt from theory to decree in a single breath, but enforcement would be a war of years. And wars of years devoured physicians faster than soldiers. An hour later you threaded cramped corridors toward the infirmary, craving laudanum-laced sleep. Instead you found the page. Alvaro was his name, you learned, waiting by a brazier, eyes reflecting the ember glow. He thrust a folded scrap into your palm. "Slipped under my door, senor." For words scrawled in wine-dark ink, "The child still lives." Your pulse leapt. Impossible, you had felt the heart stutter, falter, fail. Yet memory rebelled. In that final moment, did your trembling fingers miss a faint throb? The thought sliced hope and horror in equal measure. "Who sent this?" you asked. He shook his head. "A hooded sister, one of the convent midwives, perhaps." You raced to the crypt. The lid of Clara's coffin sat undisturbed, the seal of Aragon pressed like a bruise in the wax. But wax could be melted, lids resealed. You brushed away frost, laid ear to the wood. Silence, a roaring, absolute silence that mocked the whisper of life. Still doubt lodged like a fishbone. As you turned, a hiss skimmed the chamber. "Doctor," the Inquisitor, unchained, silhouette inked against torch glow. Blood speckled his sleeve where, you guessed, a guard now bled elsewhere. In one hand he held a sacrificial dagger, in the other, a tiny bundle swaddled in gray linen. Not Clara, too small. A nurse's stillborn? A bargaining chip pulled from the morgue? His grin gleamed. The people require spectacle. A miracle of resurrection, perhaps. He placed the bundle on the altar. The linen twitched. Alive. A newborn drawn from some nameless mother's sorrow, destined to play Infanta in a grotesque theater. His plan unfurled. Discredit the Queen's reforms by presenting proof of physician incompetence. The dead child revived under holy hands. Panic would crown old dogma anew. You advanced, heart-hammering. "Leave the babe," you said, voice raw. "Take me for your sermon instead." He chuckled. "Martyrs are cheap, dynasties rare. Blade kissed your throat, icy precise. You wrote truth on parchment. I shall write legend on flesh." In that instant Alvaro sprang from shadow, swinging a censer like a mace. Incense coals burst against the Inquisitor's temple, sparks blossomed. He staggered, you wrenched the dagger free, driving its pommel into his jaw. Bone cracked, he crumpled, eyes rolling white. The chamber filled with incense and blood metal tang. You scooped the squalling infant, a girl by the feel, heart racing. Not Clara, yet no less sacred. Alvaro knelt by the unconscious priest, chest heaving. "What now?" "Now," you said, "we trade monsters for witnesses." Dawn bled pink over Escorial's spires as crowds thronged before the basilica. News of a fresh miracle had spread overnight. Lies sprint faster than truth, and the Inquisitor's agents still scuttled in every shadow. You stepped onto the steps beside Mariana, swaddled infant in your arms, Villalobos at your flank, clergy arrayed like chess bishops. Mariana raised her hands. "People of Castile, last night a would-be prophet sought to mislead you with a false resurrection." Gasps serrated the cold air. She gestured to you. "Dr. Morales will show how deception bleeds when cut." You unwrapped the bundle. The crowd leaned, breath held. The baby's skin bore midwife chalk marks, not royal inks, her wrists still tied with a convent's cotton tag. Evidence plain as daylight. Murmurs rolled across the plaza. Foundling, trickery. Then Mariana spoke again, voice iron soft. "We will not let innocent flesh atone for guilty tongues. This child, though nameless, shall be christened Esperanza, hope, and raised under my protection." She kissed the infant's brow. Cheers erupted, rough but genuine. The Inquisitor, bound and gagged at the portico, writhed like a worm exposed to sun. His reign of fear ended not with pyres but with a foundling's consecration, a poetry even he could not burn away. Snow melted into sludge over the next weeks. Reforms etched into royal decree cooled tempers little by little. But rumors were hydra-headed. Some swore you and the Queen were lovers, others that Clara had been a changeling all along. No edict could cauterize every tongue. Yet on the eve of Lent you sat in your cell, no longer barred, penning a final note to Mariana before departing for Seville. The page waited with a travel cloak and a nervous smile. You sealed the letter. "Let light remain your physician. Let truth be the swaddling cloth of every heir." Beneath the wax you slipped a single white carnation, its petals spotless at last. Torch in hand, you strode into the corridor where the hush felt different, not the hush of secrets smothered, but of a kingdom catching tentative breath. Far off, a child's laugh echoed, Esperanza learning a first joy in some sunlit nursery. You allowed yourself, for the span of that laugh, to believe Spain might yet outgrow the coffin it built for itself. A coffin 7 pounds heavy, hammered shut by centuries, pried open by one sleepless winter. Outside, dawn cracked the horizon, spilling gold across slush-gray earth. A blade of light long enough, perhaps, to cut new paths through old blood. A decade slipped past like blood through bandages, and each year seemed to pick at the scab you and Queen Mariana had tried to knit over Spain's wounds. By 1676 the Escorial gardens, once trimmed like chessboards, lay scorched under the boots of half-paid tercios drilling for wars that never ended. In Madrid's wine-stinking taverns, bards still sang of Infanta Esperanza, the foundling of light, yet the tune had curdled to satire. Hope is cheap, bread is dear, switch the two and feed the year. You had fled court long before the verses turned. Seville's salt-damp alleys offered anonymity. Your shingle hung over a doorway that smelled of orange blossom and sewage in equal measure. Nightly you dressed amputations from colonial sugar plantations, whispering prayers learned in darker halls. But rumor hunts its prey. One mist blue dawn a courier arrived with royal livery frayed at the cuffs, another budget cut. He delivered a letter sealed in black wax. Inside, only 3 words in Mariana's hand. Faith is drowning. Thus you returned, riding north beneath a sky the color of hammered pewter, each milestone a rosary bead counting down to calamity. When El Escorial's granite mass finally punched the horizon, its towers looked like burnt matchsticks planted in snow. The page, Alvaro no longer a boy but a thin-jawed man, met you at the cloister gate. Linen bandaged his left forearm, where cavalry sabers had kissed flesh in street skirmishes. "Doctor," he murmured, "they're calling it the Winter of Widows. Half the city's men are in Flanders graves. The other half drink to forget why. Inside the palace your boots slipped on frost-slick flagstones. Portraits you remembered, oiled giants in ruffs, now sagged under mildew. Even the air felt bruised. In the royal nursery, a 9-year-old girl knelt at an iron brazier, coaxing life from embers that refused to burn. Long dark hair curtained her face. When she looked up, amber eyes pierced you clean through. Esperanza. The crooked jaw of Clara's ghost did not haunt her features, yet sadness did, etched premature as crow feet. She coughs every night, Mariana whispered behind you, voice ground coarse by years of unrelenting audience. Blood on her pillow at dawn. Your remedies once saved what was doomed. I beg for an encore. You touched the girl's wrist, thin, fluttering, then pressed fingers to her back as she inhaled. Rowels crackled like parchment. Tuberculosis. A royal fate as hereditary as any Habsburg deformity. Esperanza caught your gaze. "Is my mother afraid?" she asked, accent clipped from French tutors paid with Spain's remaining silver. The question gutted you. Children sense terror even wrapped in silk. You knelt eye level, only of a world too harsh for gentleness. She nodded as if she'd expected no other answer. That night you brewed foxglove and licorice, hoping to ease her spasms. Yet each spoonful she swallowed was a coin paid to a ferryman you couldn't bribe. Dawn found you at her bedside counting breaths that halted, lurched, then failed. When the final exhale feathered your palm, the palace clocks froze at that second. Not by mechanism, but by hush. Mariana's scream climbed corridors, shredding tapestries of saints. Outside, news traveled faster than plague. Foundling dies, hope follows. Market stalls shut mid-haggle, church bells told themselves hoarse. In taverns the satire turned elegy. Light snuffed, darkness fed, Spain now mourns what never bled. In the Hall of Mirrors the Cortes convened by candle stump to debate succession. With no living infanta and the Habsburg line withered to the sickly King Charles, rival claimants sharpened parchments into spears. Bourbon envoys invoked ancient marriage treaties, Habsburg cousins in Vienna rattled sabers. Across the Pyrenees, Louis XIV reportedly laughed. "What poor Spain guards with prayer, I shall claim with powder." You watched powerless as statesmen traded titles like dice in a cup. Villalobos, beard gone ash-white, leaned to you and muttered, "We stitched the wound but left rot inside." Hours later he clutched his chest and slid beneath the debating table, dead before you could pry his rosary from locked fingers. Toward midnight Mariana summoned you one last time. She sat in the royal chapel where it had all begun, wearing mourning black that swallowed candlelight. Before her lay Esperanza's small coffin, unsealed. "She was never of my blood," the queen said, voice brittle as winter grass. "Yet she was my heart. Tell me, doctor, does rebellion earn mercy in the next life?" You answered what truth remained. "If God weighs intent, Majesty, your scales overflow." She nodded, slipped a gold locket into your hand. Inside, a curl of infant hair the color of dawn. "Carry her south," she said. "Scatter these strands in the Alpajara winds so no chain of heraldry can claim her even in death." The order was treason against the cult of dynastic burial, but the queen's eyes left no room for dissent. Before cockcrow you rode out through a side gate, snowflakes spinning like ash. Behind you, the first artillery wagons clattered into Madrid, French tricolors flapping, Spanish standards nowhere in sight. You did not look back, the future was already blazing, and you had no more water to give. 3 days later, atop a ragged ridge above Granada, you opened the locket to the sunrise. The hair caught a gust and vanished, a brief glint in cold dawn. You whispered a physician's benediction, one no catechism taught. "May your bones know no throne, may your name require no crown." Descending the slope, you caught distant thunder, cannon not storm. The War of the Spanish Succession had drawn its first breath, iron-lunged and ravenous. All you'd done, every secret exposed, every life risked, had bought Spain 10 fragile years, the span of a foundling girl's heartbeat. Sometimes, you realized, hope isn't meant to live long. It's meant to flare, bright enough to blind those who profit from darkness, hot enough to brand a warning onto history's hide, then gutter out so others feel the chill and choose a different fire. You turned south toward the sea, where ships sailed to worlds that still believed the future could be invented rather than inherited. Behind you, Madrid burned against the winter sky, sparks swirling like the remnants of a white carnation at last consumed.